Welcome to AW 360 Live at Advertising Week, New York. I'm BJ Smith, and I'm joined by Juan de Lascurain.
Perfect.
And you are with Dream Big.
Yes. Yes.
What is Dream Big?
So I'm an entrepreneur, designer. Dream Big is a brand that I created actually by accident because my background was in sports. I grew up playing tennis. I'm from Mexico City. But grew up playing tennis. All my youth I was in a tennis court, and then I also loved to run. So I was a tennis player, played in college in the U.S., then became a triathlete, traveled around the world competing in Ironmans. And I always, after my career, as an athlete, I wasn't professional in tennis or anything, but played in college. But after my triathlon, after I finished like my sports, I started giving conferences. They would invite me to speak in schools or universities, and I would just go for free. And at the time I was promoting sports and just inspiring young people to follow their dreams.
Right.
And so I always talked about Dream Big. And it was in 2004. I was living in Los Angeles. I had a tennis academy. After all my sports, I ended up in LA, and just another thing happened that I met a friend who was coaching in tennis in Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And he just told me, he said, hey, you should coach here. And so I started coaching, built this business with my brother. We were doing, quite well. But I was a little bit like, I was making really good money and, lived in a nice place. But I was a little bit like, I had this little thing inside, like there was something missing.
Right, okay.
So I was searching, for what was the next thing. And every time I gave conferences, I really loved the fact that I was being able to inspire. And I was, giving more than just, living life just to make money.
Right.
So in 2004, I was at the gym, and I was on the bike, and I was just flipping the channels on the TV at the same time I was exercising. And there was this Spanish network that came on the air. And I don't know why I wrote the name. I never heard of this Spanish network. And I wrote down the number. That day I went home, and I asked my mom if she was visiting. I said, hey, have you heard of this Spanish network? And she was like, no. And I'm like, well, it's a TV network. And I said, well, yeah, it's TV. And my mom was like, well, why don't you call and find out, who the owner is? And I'm like, I was not involved in TV or anything. The only thing I did other than tennis was my conferences.
Right.
So my mom ended up calling to this network. And a few days later, she said, hey, we have a meeting with the owner. And so I was like, okay. I ended up going with her, and we walked into this. It was a very, very, very small non-profit TV network. We walked into this office of the owner, and my mom at the time, she was organizing an event for the Hispanic community in San Antonio. So she wanted to talk to the owner about sponsoring the event. And they started talking, and after 5 minutes, he just turned around, looked at me, and he said, hey, and what do you do for work? And I said, oh, I'm a tennis coach right now. I have this tennis business, and I give conferences to young people. He said, you should do a TV show here.
Nice.
That's all he said.
Sudden TV star.
And I was like, okay, well, my first thought was, how much are you going to pay me?
Right.
He was like, well, nothing. This is a non-profit network. But if you want to do it, I give you 30 minutes every Saturday morning. And that's when Dream Big started. I went home that night, and I sat down literally with a piece of paper, and I said, hey, I have this opportunity. What am I going to do with it as far as the goal of inspiring people? So I wrote down that the show was going to be called Dream Big, and that it was going to be about inspiring people to follow their dreams. So I did the show for 4 years for free.
4 years, every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
That's a lot of content.
it was a lot of content. I did the show, pretty much for free. I felt like I was like sewing something at the time that I didn't know in the end how I was going to get it back. But I loved, it was a passion for me. I was able to interview a lot of people. But the most important thing that I saw was the response of people. Every time a show aired, we would get just contacts from boys, girls, moms, thinking that we were doing something that was positive.
Right.
So I kept that show for 4 years, and then one day I was trying to start a t-shirt line. At the time, I was not an artist or a designer or anything, because Dream Big is divided in different platforms, and it has 5 messages,
Which are?
discover your talent, dream big, have faith, work hard, and give back. So that was the basis of the show. And so I thought, okay, well, the next thing to try and make money with the show was to start merchandising. So I started a t-shirt line with just phrases. And I printed like 1,000 t-shirts. And I started selling them to my friends, everybody I knew. And then in 2008, I was sitting at a friend's house, and there was a napkin and a black marker, like a Sharpie.
Right.
And I was just bored, and I started, took the Sharpie and I made like some little doodles on the napkin. And so there was a lady there. It was a friend of my friend, the owner of the house. And she looked at me and she said, "Hey, you should paint."
Oh, wow.
No, that's all she said. And I never
Not
paint.
what, just go paint.
Yeah, and she just said, she said, take that, buy some canvas and make those doodles bigger. And I honestly, I was like, she's crazy,
Yeah.
Because sometimes, when we live and we grow up, we think that, we have to go to school to learn something to then apply it,
Yeah.
But I left, and after a few days, it just stuck in my head, and I went and I bought some art material, and about a couple months later, I painted my first painting, and I thought it was like cool, So I kept painting. It was about a year that I just started making paintings. I painted my jeans.
Right.
Then I started going into places in LA, and people were like, "Hey, where do you buy your jeans?" And people started giving me their jeans, and I started charging to paint their jeans.
Very cool.
So that was like the second part of what the brand, was way back then at the beginning.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's an amazing story. I personally want to spend a lot more time talking to you.
Yeah.
Just thinking about my background, I have a creative background, but I run my own business now, doing things like this for Advertising Week. You showed me your card, which this isn't going to do much good for the podcast, but if anybody can see this on camera here, is a cool picture of a classic Volkswagen bus. And I paint.
Okay.
I'm a runner.
Oh, awesome.
So,
yeah, we had a lot of things in common.
So yeah, I think we need to get together and talk. So if there's one thing that you could tell the audience that would, leave them with just one good thought, what would that be?
When I started the brand and I realized I had all these hidden talents, I discovered painting at 36. And everybody told me, "You're crazy, artists don't make money." I started thinking, okay, I need to do 2 things. One is, how can I inspire people?
Right.
Because just to sell stuff, I don't think it's enough. I think you have to give people something more to make their life better. So that's when I developed the message of the brand. So whoever is out there, whether they're entrepreneurs, they own businesses, it doesn't matter how much money you have, One is, have a message.
Right.
And what are you doing to change people, in a positive way?
Yes.
And 2, I realized that for me it was not just enough to paint art that was going to go on galleries.
Right.
So I started developing an entire collection of commercial designs, which today I have 10,000 designs. And then I started figuring out how I could partner with big brands. So for example, today I work with brands like Kleenex and other brands that they license my brand to use on their company and their designs. So those are, 2 things. One is how you can make the lives of people better. 2, have something that is, commercial. And then the third thing that I've kind of learned, a little bit along the way, is obstacles.
Right.
You have to be able to overcome all these obstacles. For me, 3 years into starting this brand, I ran out of money. Like, I had nothing. And for almost 5 years, I went from giving up my apartment in Santa Monica. I ended up living in my car. Then I went back to Mexico. Ended up, just having nothing.
Right.
So those are, the 3 things that I think are, important.
Well, perfect. Juan, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
joining
much
us.
for
Nice
having
meeting
me.
you. We'll be back with more AW360 Live at Advertising Week New York.